I think we need like a Kraftwerk voiceover, like funny, not funny, but done through like a vocoder, like a robotic voice or speak and spell.
I can do that.
Hey. Hey.
Not funny. We have a guest today. We have Robert Blake Whitehill. There is so much to his bio. I've got to pick and choose here.
Okay.
Robert was born in Mardela Springs, in the Eastern Shore Peninsula of Maryland.
It's that part that hangs down. It's sort of a neologism of Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia.
The Delmarva Peninsula.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Went to Quaker schools. I know this. Actually, went to a school that my friend went to in Westtown. Trained as an actor at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. Did some work at the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York City. Wrote screenplays. Has won awards. Written many, many books. Grew up sailing, but now flies a Cessna.
Mm-hmm.
And has served a number of years as an EMT-B, which is a designation of EMT that I don't know. Why B?
It means basic, and it means that you can be really, really helpful in splinting and bandaging and stuff, but you can't break the skin like a medic can with needles full of medical wonderfulness.
Well, I mean, an author who has been an EMT, I immediately think of Hemingway. So there you are. You are a modern day Hemingway.
And Gertrude Stein was.
Did
as
she?
Well. I believe she was.
This I didn't know.
So
this is where I should do that. So this is what authors do. They go around fixing people or putting bandages on. I suppose they don't break the skin.
It's an adrenal kind of existence to make up for the solitude.
Very smart. Never thought of it. So Robert, we have been reading the book Deadrise. I have finished it. I don't know if Lionel's made it through. You picked it up late, Lionel?
I picked it up at around 10 o'clock today.
Awesome. All right.
I'm halfway through.
We have many treats in store.
This is a rockin' book. This in the beginning, even though there's a big discovery in the beginning of this book, and I don't want to give away too many things, but there's a big reveal at the very beginning of the book. And the main character, Ben, discovers something awful, but then it sort of really goes into like the life of fishermen, and there's a lot about his relationship with his girlfriend, this mysterious man, Ellis. I'm bad with names from books, so please.
You're on the money.
We kind of know his deal, except that he works with Ben a lot, and they have like kind of a good working relationship,
right.
But this discovery throws a lot of things into confusion. And Ellis seems like a little more informed about what's going on than Ben. And so all of that goes on. Then we meet this other character. I'm going to get his name completely wrong. This is the Nemesis. And he's fantastic. He's a really great bad guy. And why am I spacing?
Chalk.
Chalk. Yeah,
Chalk. Yeah.
Wayland Chalk.
Yeah. Wayland.
Yes.
And he's working for a politician, and I mean, he's clearly really smart. He's diabolical. He's great. You don't really get a sense that how diabolical he is in the beginning, and then as the book goes on, you realize this is the one heartless mother, and he's a heartless motherfucker. I'm just going to say it because I know F-bomb. I have to put an E on the episode.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
But from that point on, when things start to heat up, when Wayland meets Ben, and before Wayland meets Ben, when he sort of inserts himself into the general vicinity, which is the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh yeah.
Things start to go seriously pear-shaped.
You get the real clues about Maynard's how bad he's willing to be on for whatever small picayune reason. He's got a diagnosis of psychopathy with a side of psychosis, and he's not heads. He's off his meds.
Off his meds.
Yeah, that's right.
You know
that's
how
right.
things go when we're off our meds.
Exactly. He performs, admirably under the circumstances. Not admirably, I would say. He performs
vigorously,
Yes.
amorally. It gives him the edge to get off his meds, which are damping down all his basic primal urges. It gives him his edge back, and that's what he kind of likes about it.
He's a really bad dude, and it's great. And we're in his head a lot, which is great. And so there's a lot of action that takes place in the Bay. There's a lot of political intrigue, sort of greater world problems that have entered Ben's life. And Ben has military training and has to put it to good use.
And he's got his own after effects of that military experience. Right. He's got he sees stuff that he's not sure he's seeing, and that's always bad for a guy holding a gun.
Sniper. He's a sniper, right? So you do not want a hallucinating sniper. That's usually not a good thing.
And Ellis was a sniper with Ben's dad, in Vietnam.
Now, what I really liked was I really perked up at the dialogue between Ellis and Ben. Yeah. I like that. Was that part of your growing up on the Eastern Shore? Were you spooling that from memory?
In part, in no small part, am I recalling that, because there are a lot of words that are particular to Smith Island and that area.
The mesh.
What's
the mesh?
It's the marsh.
Yeah.
And I didn't go so far as to write oyster as arster, because then it starts reading like a Mark Twain piece where he does a deep dive into dialect. And
no.
It's just for, we can appreciate it in Mark Twain, but these days, do so at your peril, as well.
We're back into Ridley Walker territory at that point. But
I mean, so you that, because it had a wonderful cadence to it. It had a good bounce.
I appreciate that. I work very hard on it, and it comes in particular use in writing scripts. Even though what we know about a character in a movie is what they do, and we cannot rely on what they say. What they say better be pithy and interesting, and that's where all that acting training served me in good stead.
Right.
Because I don't just write dialogue. I stand up and I declaim it.
Yeah.
And make sure that it's got all the qualities that you're talking about: the bounce, the rhythm, and I make sure that the most emphatic and important words are toward the end, if not at the end of the sentence or the little speech. All of these things are really important to me, so that a reader can hear that voice if they're that kind of a reader. Unless they blast through things really quickly and don't hear things, fine, they'll get the gist. But I'm a kind of reader where I read very slowly, and I hear what is being said read in my head. So I don't need any of those apps that do that, because I kind of do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
As a creator. Yeah.
And the characters are very distinct. That's a wonderful thing, is that I'm trying to think of who does this badly. It's possible you could sort of see Isaac Asimov writing, the same guy, but doing two sides of an argument. These are very different people, and it really comes across in terms of the way they talk and the way the words they use, just the way they express themselves, or how they hold back. Ellis is very, very reserved. You really can't get any information out of him, and in several places you really need some information. Things are fairly dire.
When I write his chapters, and I'm switching as narrator from voice to voice, from character to character, he is very reserved, and you don't get a lot out of him until it's the absolute last minute.
Right.
So.
And also, and Lionel, you haven't gotten here, a lot of things are held back. So Ben, one lovely thing is that we don't know Ben's full plan. Ben has a plan. He's not sure it's going to work, but it's very complex. And there isn't a part of the great discovery of this book is figuring out Ben's kind of long-term plan for dealing with several very difficult situations that are hitting Chesapeake Bay all at once.
And how Ellis might confound a couple of those plans without meaning to.
Right.
But he does or can, and all of that has to be worked with because, you have a decent working relationship between Captain and Color, Ben and Dr. Ellis Hogan. And when the trust begins to disintegrate between them, then all bets are off. Everybody's afraid to say too much.
Right.
And all we can do is move the plot forward through those telltale actions. And there are people on the island it's a little bit of an internecine conflict as well between Ben and Ellis and the other citizens that live on Smith Island in the Chesapeake Bay.
So I looked up Smith Island. So I'm totally ignorant about the surroundings. Smith Island, I think, is the only island that is not connected to landmass. You have to get there by ferry.
Correct.
In the bay. And then the larger island, it's mentioned several times. Tangier, right.
Tangier is in Virginia, right on the border of Maryland and Virginia. And they have a little bit of a competitive edge because they also have an airstrip.
Right. The airstrip.
Smith Island has a helipad, and most of the time it's not underwater, which is good.
Yeah, I wish I had actually looked at a map before I started reading. It would have given me a better idea of where the what do we call them, terrorists, where the the terrorist parties have launched from, or how they arrive, and how some backup troops arrive or try to arrive.
Yes, try is a good word.
Yeah, and so because geography is a big part of this, it really takes place in this in this real place that has real obstructions and is experiencing a hurricane at the time that the story is going on.
Which I love, which is a great way to isolate. It's all the horror movie tropes of put 10 people in a cabin and chop them up in a locked cabin.
Yeah.
I can apply some of those same frightful aspects to an island, which becomes inaccessible by air or by water during a heavy storm. And then you've got to deal with whoever survived to get onto the island at the time. And nobody is going anywhere real fast because of all those circumstances. And the nice thing is you can knock down a cell tower, so it doesn't work quite so well. So we're back to the 1980s.
It's the hand of God. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the book we're talking about is called Deadrise, which also I had trouble with the name of the book because I couldn't pin it on anything. It just sounded like, a compound word that was there to be cool until I realized it's a nautical term. It has to do with, and I couldn't quite figure out what it is. It's the angle of the bow of the boat to the water or the.
It's interesting. There's all kinds of definitions, but the key definition here is if you're looking at the very back of the boat, it's the angle from horizontal that goes from the keel up to the side of the boat. So if you draw a line from the keel to the side of the boat, it's an angle that goes up. So that's the Deadrise angle. But it, like the phrase downeaster in Maine or in that area, it has come to represent the name of a type of workboat.
Oh, okay.
Has a Deadrise angle,
right? Because they refer to one of the boats as a Deadrise. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a very flat bottom boat with a very small Deadrise angle typically, and they can go like hell across the water from workplace to workplace, from trot line to trot line or trap to trap. And they really move fast on a planing manner. And then you back the throttle down and you're back to having a displacement boat that can move slowly enough and is beamy and stable enough to do a very rough manual labor aboard her. And the people that do that are just amazing.
So it's a workboat. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Did you actually spend did you spend a lot of time doing this on these boats and stuff like that?
No, I have not done the work myself. I mewed myself up at the, I know a bit about it just from growing up in the area, but the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum has all kinds of examples of all the various boats. And in fact, my brother brought a Chesapeake Bay boat back from the Caribbean, where it was basically about to sink, and he brought it back and reconditioned it, donated it to the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Her name is the Winnie Estelle, and in fact, I did name the Miss Dotsy boat that belongs to Ben Blackshaw.
That's right.
I named that after a boat, a similar boat that my brother had. It was also a Deadrise workboat, and so a lot of the things I've learned from being on it for the day or three that we were out trot lining blue crabs, and the other times we were misbehaving after dark at various wrecks and things of that nature, doing salvage work in the dark.
Mm. So which is mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
Oystering in the dark. Yeah, not a good idea. The boat that belonged to Hiram, is that also a Deadrise? Because one of the things that I should have known was the size of these boats. In my imagination, they kept getting larger and smaller.
This Dotsy is not the biggest. It's in the 25-foot range, and Hiram Harris's Deadrise is much larger. It could even be, I forget if I denote whether it's a twin or a single, but I think it's a twin-engined boat with all the added maneuverability. But they come in many different sizes, but the place they're going is the Chesapeake Bay, all the same.
Nice.
The feeling I got, when I was reading this stuff, when I was reading the book, I thought of other authors who are very much tied to a particular locale. I thought a lot of Carl Hiaasen.
Yes.
And and how he deals with Florida, especially the Everglades.
Yes.
And that kind of stuff. And he too has a fabulous sense of humor. There's a troupe of characters. I thought of him. And then, of course, I thought about somebody who really doesn't focus too much on stuff, but really made me think of Elmore Leonard.
Sure.
Tough guy, tough talking, tough guys in crazy situations that go sideways, and everybody starts screwing up. And there's just this humble schlub guy in the middle of it who just somehow manages to thread his way through this complete chaos of all these professionals who are going sideways. So
they want big men in tights.
Mel Brooks.
No, it's I don't think it is Mel Brooks. I think it's it's a Coen Brothers film. But so again, this is the first of the Ben Blackshaw series. Yes. And I am totally going to be reading the next in the series.
Good. Thank you.
I'm hooked. And how could you not be? The thing is, it just, when it gets going, it just flies across the surface of the water. It doesn't let up. And awesome. Until you get to the end, and then it raises some new questions, and you kind of want to know more. So, definitely, it definitely hooked me.
Thank you for starting with Deadrise. I try to make a nuanced, connection and development of character arcs and plot arcs, and from one book to the next. So I think you'll find value in going to Nitro Express second, and are you reading it in print or in Kindle? I'm just curious.
I'm reading it in Kindle because I read at night when everybody's asleep. So yes, I didn't actually see all the important work that goes into designing a print book. Unfortunately, not to worry. But I've been there. I know. I kind of know.
Of course you do.
There's work that goes into that. It's not, I was like, so how do you automatically lay out your book? It's like, no, you don't. You don't automatically lay out your book.
Yeah. I go to a very good company that does it called Telemachus Press. And they do an awesome job in the Kindle and print world perfectly. And then for the German editions, that's a separate company. They bought the books through a more of a recognizable legacy deal. And so they control everything from covers to layout to even renaming them in more of a German feeling kind of way, which works for me because they're awesome at their job. Lucifer Verlag, what a great company.
And how many? I see that it's translated into German. Have you had it translated in other languges?
No, it's only in English and German right now. Basically, haven't pushed the other languages. Basically, it's a guy who comes along and says, we want to publish in this language. And I say, go ahead. And so it's the Germans and the Americans right now, Australians, English as well.
Wait, Dragage's gold?
Dirty gold.
Dirty gold.
Dirty gold. Yeah.
Nice.
And the other one is In the Crosshairs. They took Nitro Express and changed it to In the Crosshairs.
Right.
Tap Rack Bang was completely buffaloing everybody. So they changed that name as well to
I like Die Snuff Killer.
In the Hand of the Snuff Killer. That's pretty evocative for the German reader, thank God.
Yes.
How many books have you written?
There are 6 titles out in English and 4, soon to be 5 in German.
And that's
total
that's
books.
That's
a total of 6. Total of 6. I've never written off brand yet. I haven't done any.
Have you written anything outside the Ben Blackshaw thing?
Mostly screenplays, but no novels, no books. And screenplays don't really get published. They're sort of a business-to-business creation, and I have 2 of those currently under option with various companies.
Nice.
Yeah.
You wrote one called UXB?
Yes. Actually, UXO is Unexploded Ordnance.
Yeah.
That one is an award winner out of the Hamptons International Film Festival. And the one that I'm really excited about right now is called Defiant. It's it's sort of a biopic about Robert Smalls. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was enslaved in Charleston working as a harbor pilot. And one night in 1862, when all the Confederate naval officers were ashore, he got his family aboard and the family of the other enslaved crew in the Charleston harbor, middle of the night, and stole the 160-foot gunship that he was piloting.
Wow.
And took it out to the Union blockade and said, "Here's your boat back."
Wow.
And then he goes on to
that's a bit tricky, though, isn't it? I mean, approaching the Union blockade in a gunship.
A black guy.
Black guy. Yeah. Is that your boat? Yeah. Listen.
He had his wife sew up a white flag from a sheet from the hotel where she was working. She sewed up a flag so that they would not be shot to pieces by the Union blockade, thinking they were blockade runners, as many were. And many of them were destroyed, but they were blockade runners being manned by, Confederate Navy, and they were trying to get cotton to Cuba and bring in, boarding cutlasses and whatever other arms and material they needed that were being supplied by the English at the time.
Wow.
By some of them. So, yeah, it's an interesting story. He was then elected to Congress 5 times.
I'd heard this story before.
He's an amazing guy. Founded a railroad, founded a newspaper, started our public school system as we recognize it for, people of all colors and every economic. It was free, compulsory school. He's really a remarkable guy. And the part I've written so far is only, touching on the escape part, which is getting wonderfully expanded in some graphic novels that are going to be coming out.
Nice.
4 editions of graphic novels and a sort of reader's guide that will be introduced into school systems so that we remember who the hell this amazing guy was.
Yeah, well, clearly some members of Congress are still pissed at him, so trying to undo what he did. But we don't talk about politics here. That was a slip.
Hold on, I do have a question though. When you say our public school system, do you mean the United States public school system or Maryland's? He was one of the first people to start free compulsory schools for people of all colors. At that time, in Reconstruction, that was still working.
Wow.
And my one of my 3 times great aunts was a Quaker missionary down in the Port Royal experiment, where they were teaching, because the Barrier Islands fell very quickly in the early part of the Civil War. About 50 Quaker teachers and doctors headed down to that area to teach literacy, to minister to the sick. And even though the war was happening just across the water on the mainland, so it's a very interesting time where a black man could successfully run for office, which he did. And, he was part of the state legislature for United States Congress. He's a remarkable individual.
And who else? It's fascinating. I was reading. I'm sorry, I don't want to, because it's all about you. But I've mentioned a book before that I love, and I really, it's incredibly dry, and not incredibly dry, but it's hardcore history. And I've mentioned it before. There's a guy who wrote the book called American Nations, which was his theory that America is 11 different countries. And it's a great book. It's almost like Linda Goodman's Love Signs for American history, because it's very poppy. But when you read it, you're like, yeah, that makes an enormous amount of sense, because I've never really understood anything about American politics until you read this book. So I highly recommend it. But the entire book, American Nations, is premised upon this theory, that he talks about only in one paragraph, that the nature and aspect of a particular area is determined enormously by the first people who settle there. Right. Even if they're very few in number, if it's settled by Quaker missionaries, that's going to have a huge and lasting impact on that community for hundreds of years.
I wish the Quakers were the first, but they were actually there to serve the Gullah people, the people who were speaking Gullah, the Gullah Geechee people, as they referred to. And it depends on when you're looking at that area to determine who is, in control, because, Reconstruction was deconstructed fairly early on at post Civil War history, and it fell again to the South, as many people refer to it and think of it today, where certain minorities are excluded or not included, depending on your point of view.
Yeah, and then he wrote another book where he wrote another book called Union. And it's the story of the first people to write American histories, like the first academics who actually took a hand at writing what is the history of America. In like the mid 1800s, they actually started writing the first American history books. And what was fascinating about it is that it's actually 5 people I think he follows. He follows these 2 famous historians that are completely unknown today. He follows a historian that's still remembered, Frederick Jackson Turner.
Okay.
Which is a fascinating story. But the one person he talks about, and this is why I mentioned this whole thing, it's only taken a half an hour to get here, is he talks about Frederick Douglass. And I really didn't understand what a really fascinating character Frederick Douglass is. I mean, to a certain degree, not tragic, but his life was, he was incredibly popular.
And very driven. That can instill an aspect of hardship to any life, is when one is really driven about what one cares about, which was emancipation and elevation of Black people in the time.
And he went everywhere, and he gave speeches everywhere, and he went to England. His life was threatened, and he and his wife were constantly under threat. I just wonder, does he make an appearance in your screenplay about this guy?
Well, he was present when Robert Smalls was invited to speak with Abraham Lincoln, along with the Secretary of War, Stanton, I believe. And Lincoln wanted to meet Smalls because Lincoln was still on the fence about whether to enlist Black soldiers, because he was afraid that the border states would go to the South if Black soldiers were enlisted. And Smalls was one of the big reasons that he got the Militia Act through, in which allowed for the enlistment of Black soldiers. The Navy of the North was already 20% Black.
Really?
But the Army had not been integrated in that way at all. So Robert Smalls is instrumental in persuading Lincoln to the Militia Act, which allowed for the enlistment of Black soldiers finally. Which also, by the way, got Jewish soldiers their first rabbi in the Army ever with that same act.
Well, were Jewish people excluded from being in the Army at that time?
They were not excluded from being in the Army, but they had no pastoral care. There was no There was no, there were plenty of reverends of various sects and priests and things like that, but there was no rabbi to speak to them. And he came out of the oldest Ashkenazi synagogue in Philadelphia, and that was his new gig, which was pretty cool. I don't remember his name, and I should.
I want to mention two things. One, the books, Lionel, you were mentioning are by Colin Woodard. And then the second thing is, Robert, you grew up in the same town as Frederick Douglass did originally. Is that right?
From the Eastern Shore, yes.
Yeah.
Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass both hail from the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Wow. I don't place them there in my head. It's funny. Frederick Douglass, I'm not sure where to place in terms of his origins, but I didn't know that Harriet Tubman was from there. And it reminds me, one time I did a gig on the peninsula in Chesapeake Bay. I can't tell you what town. There was a little club, and it definitely had this kind of fisherman vibe. Cool. And it was great. And we passed a sign along the road going down there. It said Mason-Dixon line. We're like, is that right?
Yeah.
It goes right through the peninsula, doesn't it? Right, because Virginia. What part of it is in Virginia?
Yep.
The Underground Railroad is in part in Virginia. You've got the canal, the 12-mile canal created by enslaved people in the 18th century through the Great Dismal Swamp. So that's there. But the Mason-Dixon line is north. It's kind of on the Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey environs.
Okay.
So depending on where you were in your drive, you certainly could see that.
It was below the Mason-Dixon line, apparently, is where we played. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It's got that sound to it.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, that was very memorable, that show. We met a lot of characters there. And I wanted to go back to Deadrise for a minute. The two things. There is in the story, you get a sense that this sleepy little fishing community is anything but sleepy, or maybe they are sleeping in terms of like being a sleeping giant. There is this sense of history behind where they come from. And I'll give away a little bit. They're originally settled by Blackbeard, by pirates. Is that right?
They do have piracy in their DNA going way back, for sure. Yeah. But they came to it pretty much on their own. They were not necessarily settled by pirates, but for instance, during the Revolutionary War, they had letters of marque, many of the captains, from George III to sink, burn, otherwise damage and harass shipping belonging to the colonies. And they were Smith Islanders first and Americans sometime thereafter.
Right. Yeah. Right. There is that real sense of rebel, but not along the north-south lines, just islanders.
No, it's us and everybody else.
Yeah.
And they were there were all kinds of confiscations of their normal hunting grounds.
Yeah, you talk about that a little in detail.
Yeah, it's very sad that they had to do that, but which turned good people into outlaws and poachers, and through no fault of their own.
Very much like the bootlegging in the British Isles, which I argue really is the foundation of a lot of our country. There's sort of bootlegging culture, and then there's whatever came out of the puritanical thing, and then the mercantile culture in New York City.
Well, let me readdress what you said. They do come from Cornwall, and Penzance is where we get the Pirates of Penzance, that light opera.
Right.
And many of them were from there, but they didn't necessarily come here to be pirates. There was certainly, the Chesapeake Bay was bounteous in terms of blue crabs, oysters, mussels, and for a brief time, terrapin, turtles. And so they could make a living there, and certainly shooting the waterfowl as well. So they could make a living, but when rules, regulations began to encroach, they began to push back in ways that were outside the bounds of, lawmakers at the time. I mean,
well, and I don't mean that bootlegging is a slight. I mean, I actually, the history of that is you can certainly look at it in the same way. Is that here are farmers who've figured out a way to turn their crops into durable goods.
Yes.
And the king wanted a cut, or to say who could do it and who couldn't. And they were like, no, screw you. I mean, there is a real through line, I think.
Adios. Exactly. Yeah. We're going to move along to the new country land.
Just use corn instead of barley. But but that and rye. But there's a great feel of the culture, and also the deadliness. When it there is a bit of a piracy feel in terms of the stakes. The stakes are very high. There's possibility of a great deal of wealth, and among the islanders, it becomes kind of unclear who can trust who.
Very true.
How together are we, and until what point? Or there's one great, one bit of treasure is revealed by Ben, and he's like, okay, no, when I say the rest, are they all going to shoot me?
Yes, exactly. Right? He's got to be really careful with how much information he lets forth. He's got to become an unreliable narrator with the rest of the islanders that they're directly involved in. That's a very interesting point. Yeah,
it's brilliant. It's really fun. Now, is that island that's covered in heron poop? Is it heron poop or gull poop?
The rookery, that's blue heron poop. Yeah,
blue heron rookery.
Yeah, is that a real island? That is, and the lighthouse too. I imagine.
The lighthouse, yes,
still standing.
Yes, I may have pushed around some of the geography about where they lie, but that's the power I possess.
Oh, you have to. Yeah. Otherwise, it's like yes, and then they went 6 hours from here. No, that's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah. No,
a heron rookery is a place that is usually visited only by Audubon folks doing the Christmas count because it absolutely reeks of guano. It is a miserable place for anyone except a heron.
Yeah, I hope we haven't given away too much because everybody should be reading this. And this is the first in your series, first of 6. What year did you finish it?
I finished it and put it out in 2012.
Yeah, that's not that long ago, actually. For 6,
it isn't that long ago. It was a long time in the working process. I had a friend advising me who knew I was a screenwriter primarily and a TV writer, and he said, "You really need to write a novel." And I said, "Okay."
Why?
What?
Why? Why do you really? I'm sorry. Go ahead. But I find it fascinating. Why do you really have to write a novel?
I think it was because he viewed. We had written scripts together.
Okay.
And so he had a sense of my creative voice, very close up and personal. And he said, but he looked and said, but I deal mostly in books, and that's where I can best judge. So let me judge you on this in this new area and ask you to try that out. And I got all excited and said, okay, I can do that. I mean, a screenplay is about 20, 30,000 words over a certain number of pages, and 100 to 120. Right. And a book can be 80 to 100 some thousand, depending on what level of popular fiction you want to enter at.
Measured in pounds.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, that was an initial problem. Deadrise came in at the 400 pages that was suggested, and I sent it off to this guy to read. And then he called me up. He said, "You jerk! 400 page double space, not single space. I'd written 800 pages essentially." So there was a massive active paring back. So there's a lot of stuff. I probably wrote as many drafts as other writers sometimes struggle through in terms of the volume done. But I finally brought it in at the right number of pages, and we moved forward from there and won't look back. But it was a damn doorstop. You totally got that right. Oh my gosh.
You just put "to be continued" in the middle, and then you make it another book, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the only note. There were some qualitative changes that I'd gone way too literary with it as well, and I needed to pare it back. Short, declarative sentences, then some really great action. Don't be the next guy to write an autistic brother or some things like that, which I did not do. So,
right.
Yeah.
I also write, and I was very jealous of some of your words. I said this to Greg Olear too. There's certain words that I hit that I'm like, I have to look this up. And
it's Kindle. You can just
the perfect. Yeah, you just tap on it, which is amazing. But yes, in every case, it was like this perfect unknown word to me.
Okay.
So people who are into vocabulary will love this. It's not everywhere. It just comes in. At just the right moment. So that was really fun.
Yeah, folks who are not on boats on a regular basis they touch the underlined word or the word in question fairly regularly. And
oh, please. Let's not talk about that. The guy who wrote Master and Commander, that guy?
O'Brien, sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I must have read like 14 of those books, and I still don't understand what the hell he's belaying pin? What?
Yeah.
I still didn't get it.
What's a futtock shroud? And am I cursing? Am I cursing when I say this, or am I not?
Yeah, it's like, can you give me a map? Even Tolkien gave me a map. He gave me a map and a glossary. Can't you do the same? But no, we have to put in all this insane terminology.
Oh, he was very committed to his space. Not so much as in the Hornblower books, for example, which is a little more accessible. But then he slips in these humorous things where there's a Spanish ship called the Cacafuego, which means the S-fire, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of funny. And there are other aspects of it that are humorous as well. But man, he was painstaking about his nautical verisimilitude.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Really
well, these
annoying.
are some of the words that I was thinking of were not nautical terms at all. They were just the right adjective,
cool.
or adverb. So that was exciting. I was like, yeah, can I use any of these words?
In conversation, how many drinks into the party do I need to be before I can say these words and not sound like a complete idiot, right?
Yeah. They're great though. If you can kind of remember them, they're really, really awesome. And then another thing was reading the book, I thought, okay, we all went to college, into the same college. I'll give that away.
Yeah.
You obviously have a Quaker background.
Yeah.
Went to Quaker high school, Quaker college. Immediately I thought, okay, well then he must have joined the military after that. Judging from like just the terminology and the accuracy in terms of describing pretty much everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people in the book have military background.
Yeah, I will cop to never having been in the military, though I admire a few people who have, and somewhat along in the process of writing this, so I can only account for that by research and maybe an enjoyment of things that go bang. From a crazy childhood, I've come to admire anywhere that structure seems to reign. So maybe that's part of it as well. But I had a cousin who's passed now, but his name is Walter Whitehill, and he was Mac VSOG in Vietnam. And he mud checked not only my technical side militarily, but also the emotional toll that being a soldier in a firefight might exact.
Yeah.
So he was crucial to the process. And interestingly, one of the things that I remember him saying is that what he asked me, do you know what the loudest sound in a firefight is? And I said, no, I don't. What is it, Walter? He said, click. When you're out of ammunition. He said, that was the loudest sound that you're ever going to hear in a firefight. And he had so many interesting stories to tell, but I relied on him tremendously to get to test the body of knowledge that I was trying to bring. And I've learned, that not every reader is excited about every aspect of a particular firearm, and I may have dialed that back in later titles.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But there are some pretty interesting firearms in the book. I am not, this pushed my limits in terms of violence in novels, and I didn't even know I had a limit.
Interesting.
So I was right up there. I was like, well, I'm along for the ride, but wow, this is really violent. But there were these sort of hand cannons, or you had to mount them on a boat. You talked about how they're like shotguns that could take out a flock of birds.
Yes, those are
that was fascinating. And did you come across those in the Chesapeake?
Oh, they were very much a part of the work. They were also called market guns because you could efficiently, in one shot, fill a barrel, and send it with waterfowl.
Send it to market.
Send it off to market where they would pick the hardware out of it in case of lean times when you didn't have formal shot. You could put in nails and nuts and bolts and things of that nature and still do a respectable job. There's an anecdote that I heard that I put in the book where one restaurateur in Baltimore closed his restaurant and opened a hardware store based on what he'd picked out of the barrel of birds. And so all of those weapons existed in the way of finding and taking down waterfowl. They all existed. And if one visits the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, they have numerous examples of these guns. Now, there are some that were purpose-made in England by very reputable gunsmiths and big ones. But when it came to the economies of Smith Island, they didn't have recourse to the kind of money that it would take to buy such a 12-foot long weapon. And they would craft these themselves at welding pipe together and carving their own stocks and creating their own firing mechanisms. They were basically flintlocks, essentially.
You're right. You got that sense.
Yeah. And, they're massive and heavy, and you would tote them around on a boat, and you would train them left and right by using paddles on the side of the boat to adjust the left and right aim, and then you use wedges underneath it on the seat, the foremost seat, in order to get the height where you wanted it, based on where you were and the size of the flock you were looking at. And they were called headache guns for a reason. They're kind of like the Nitro Express hunting rifles that are so big, you better be more afraid of what's coming at you than of shooting the gun itself.
Right. Because this is not the kind of gun you mount on your shoulder.
Exactly.
It'll just take your shoulder off. Yeah.
Exactly. The British-made ones might have been a small enough bore that you could conceivably do that, but the ones in Smith Island were just massive, and so you bolstered them against the boat itself, and bolstered that with a burlap bag filled with pine needles, stuffed with pine needles. Absorb some of the shock so it didn't take your boat apart.
Right.
Yeah. It's all of that stuff, the Rebaldican, the punt guns or market guns, they're all the real deal.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I want to ask you about your Lionel. I'm filibustering here.
No, go ahead.
I want to ask you about your process, since I'm also a writer. Our typical questions. Do you find that you work from an outline, or do you just start going? Do you know where you're going?
I need an ending and a title.
An ending and a title.
I need to have a title that's exciting. And it's not that I workshop the idea at all during parties or with the family or anything like that. I just need a good ending, a title, and I will figure out. And I know that I start each title with a body, with a dead person, and somebody that's been murdered, and that helps sort of get things rolling. And then it's 5 pages a day, 5 days a week.
Like a discipline.
Yeah, like several months of that, and I have a rough draft in hand that I can begin editing. But each day's work starts with a quick brush of editing, like yesterday's work.
Yes.
A quick look at it, not any. So I don't like going back too early in the process, because I don't want to have that golden first chapter and the rest of it isn't anything. Right. So.
Right.
Yeah,
so that's good to know. Yeah, in terms of workshopping it at parties, my experience has been with that. You don't get invited to many parties after you do that.
Let me ask you something. If you've done that and you've had that experience, it sounds like we've both done it. What happens to the quality of the idea and the impetus to write it? Does that get vitiated at all, or what?
Well, for me, I didn't want to write it. I wanted to talk about the idea I had. I had a cool idea. And I wanted to tell everybody about it. And I just kept fighting the idea was that the fact that the only way to really tell people about it was to write a book. And now it's become 3 books.
Wow.
So
I've got one. It's on my Kindle. I'm reading it now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, so and I'm a pantser. I just I write when I feel the inspiration to write. I try to get in front of it to see if something will happen. Sometimes writing is the inspiration, but I have no idea where I'm going.
That's good. Good. I appreciate that person.
And I have no title for the 3rd book. I really don't. I don't know, and I don't know the ending. So I just go.
Except for one or two titles, folks say that my titles could be brands or styles of coffee, which I like.
Deadrise
I thought was a really
that's good though.
It was a bean roaster who said it, and I said, "Okay, I get it." Nitro Express, Tap Rack.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so I thought it was a really. It gets me nowhere in terms of the next page, but it's a really fun thing to relate sometimes.
Im Auge des Feuers. That does not sound like a coffee. In German, it's not a coffee, but
no, it's
in English it is.
In something of the fire or something of that nature. So that's not a roasted bean; it's a burned bean.
That's right. It's still in the fire. That's not something you can drink.
But it's but the English title is Geronimo Hotshot.
Yeah, got it. Oh, of course, because of the title. Their cover design is very strange in Germany, I got to say. But it must be great to have German readers.
Yeah, they've got their own thing, and I graciously step aside and let them do what they know best.
Right on.
So but they definitely look like action adventure Bourne type of posters. It really conveys the these are thrillers. This is not War and Peace. This is not the Fermata or something of that nature.
No, this is thriller is the genre.
Yep.
And this is funny because the very first thriller that Lionel and I have sort of sat down to read together.
Well, I really appreciate your venturing forth into doing that because, a lot of people are comfortable where they are, and God knows there's enough books out there in the world, with 1,100 books coming out every day. There's a lot of stuff for you to pick over and stay very comfortable in a zone you like. And I really appreciate your venturing into the thriller realm very much. Well,
it's really refreshing. I mean, and there's I've read stuff because of the podcast that I wouldn't have ordinarily read. It was a friend that recommended. It just reminded me that we knew a writer and that had gone to school with us and recommended I get in touch. And I'm really glad that I did because it was just a blast to read this, and then also a real treat to have you. You're still on the podcast, but I mean, it's a real treat that you said yes. And is it what makes this a thriller? I mean, aside from the fact that there's a lot of action and there's violence and then there is murder and then there's intrigue and suspense. Is that the combination that
I think
in that genre?
Hit every point.
There you go.
You did it. That's pretty much it. Any one of those elements missing, and I think you'd come up with something different.
Okay.
But I think that you've hit the nail on the head. A thriller, it's got to accelerate the heart rate a bit.
Yes.
And there's got to be some twists. There's got to be some unreliability in the narrator, which is fun to do. So you've really nailed it. Good job.
Okay. So that's it. We have talked about genres and how they can be really, slippery. And what Nick Brule was on, and he was saying it really comes down to what section of the bookstore it goes in.
Yes.
And there aren't many bookstores, so it's kind of where will things end up? But it sounds actually like this sits right in the middle of the genre that it was written for, which is probably pretty helpful.
That's why I'm adapting the first 3 books into screenplays. Actually, the first 2 titles are done, and I'm working on the 3rd title adaptation now because. However much we might earn through book writing, it's thinking in different mediums and seeing the possibility of your property or your intellectual property in multiple mediums that can help, pay the rent, pay the mortgage.
Yeah, well, it would. I mean, it would absolutely work. It definitely has a bit of a Bourne feel in terms of the level of action. But it also is a little more down to earth in terms of the setting and the people. Also,
real
people have history. Yes. Real people. They are, they're of a place. They're of a land. It would work. But
thank you. I kind of my quick shorthand is Banshee, like the TV show Banshee, with boats, and you've got all the internecine squabbles and lack of trust and everything, and we're all moving toward an end where only catastrophe is the result, and somehow some meet with catastrophe and others meet with the happy ending until the next book.
There will be fire or a tornado or a big explosion.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
The people I thought of were when I read this, I thought of and forgive me if I'm sure writers hate this when people say your book made me think of this, and the writer goes, I hate that guy. But no, the Jack Reacher books. I read one of those.
Okay. Cool.
Certainly reminds me. Certainly one of the granddaddies of all this stuff is Tom Clancy. I mean, although Hunt for Red October is not really a thriller like this, but his later stuff, like when he got into the Mr. Clark kind of stuff, the whole SEAL thing, Tom Clancy, that, and who else did I read? What else did this remind me?
What about Alistair MacLean? He's an early one for me. Or John D. MacDonald, the Travis McGee books. I kind of steeped myself in pulp in my way. But John D. MacDonald is a good one. Alistair MacLean, he was not so much a series guy, except in the Navarone books, The Guns of Navarone, Force 10 from Navarone.
Right.
That's as close to a series as he ever got, I think.
I'm sorry, I have to go in a complete rabbit hole here. I was watching this show called The Shock of the Modern, which is basically Robert Hughes, who I believe is this Australian author. He wrote The Fatal Shore. And it's just him completely slagging modern art for like 10 episodes, just ripping it to shreds. And he does one on architecture, and he shows this building in like South America, and he says, and this is what it led to, the Guns of Navarone without the guns. And it doesn't. And it's immediately what I thought when I saw it. It's like this big imposing building, this big horizontal slit in it. And I was like, that looks like. And then Robert Hughes goes, "Guns of Navarone without the guns." And I was like, so before it's from Navarone. So who should we read? Give us. So you said MacDonald.
John D. MacDonald is a great author. Travis McGee is a guy that lives on a boat in Florida, a houseboat he won in a poker game. And he sort of finds himself embroiled in many adventures. Who else did I say? Alistair MacLean is
Alistair MacLean.
Right.
You know him from The Guns, Ice Station Zebra, The Satan Bug, are also great adaptations of his books. He was really a go-to guy in the 60s and 70s. I admire him very much. Another guy that I like, an Australian author, writes the Napoleon Bonaparte books, where he's got a biracial Aboriginal Caucasian detective who could move in and out of both cultures, of the Aboriginal culture and Caucasian society. But he's University of Brisbane trained. Right. And I'm trying to think of his name, but if you search Napoleon Bonaparte detective stories, you'll come up with it, and I'm going to come up with it the minute we sign off. It'll make me nuts.
Right.
So anyway. These are the people who fed your head early on, and you sort of modeled some of your thoughts on what they did?
Including, but I would also include Michener, because he wrote Chesapeake, which is another great piece about there. And but definitely those are the guys. I was very much a consumer of popular fiction, and writing it is just a blast.
I just want to mention that at this point, Ellen Roth, who does our references, is just cursing us. She's just cursing a blue streak, because we just rattled off 20 references for her to link to. Go get them, Ellen. Do it. You can do it.
All right.
Do it. I just talked to her today.
Oh, good.
Finally, you fly. I fly for fun.
That, my dad was a short story writer and a novelist and a boater, and I kind of picked up his aviation hobby, habit, whatever you want to call it, as well. It's a goal. I wanted to learn how to do it. It's just such a pleasure. And the New Jersey area and Block Island and all those places with little airfields are wonderful to visit in the smaller aircraft. I don't have a big airplane. So I'm in a club with a small airplane, so it makes all these places accessible.
Yeah. That must be great.
No, it's not. I went up in one of these airplanes one time. Yeah. It's terrifying. It's like riding on a lawnmower, except you're like 800. You're like 10,000 feet up in the air. The guy, I think I told you, the guy who he had a plane. He had twin yokes, and he let me steer the plane for like 15 seconds. And afterwards, he says, I met him like a couple of years later. He says, "Yeah, I can still see your thumbprints in the yoke. You're holding the thing so tightly." I said, I hated every single second of that.
Oh my God!
Completely freaked me out. But I'm glad. It must be enormously liberating.
That is exactly it. It is liberating to be able to get up and around and go other places. There's the old adage, a mile of highway gets you a mile, and a mile of runway gets you the world.
See, I'm really excited about the new, you see the air taxis? Man, that's rocking.
Totally. They're so sleek and cool looking. And I liked how they were deployed in the Westworld series on HBO for a while. Really, really pumping up the possibilities and the excitement about those for sure.
Yeah, I just read an article about the one that they're building right now. It looks like an H, like a flying H. It's got like 4 motors on the front and 4 motors on the back. And it also comes with a parachute just in case.
Yep.
And it can go 30 kilometers, which is not a lot. And it's a pain in the ass to recharge it. But you know what? They said the price was something like $90,000. And I'm like, that's kind of reasonable. I mean, you're getting into the reasonable range there at that point.
Right.
Yeah, so are they robot flown or are they?
No, you fly.
No, you fly them.
But I think they may have some basic AI in them to keep you from like falling out of the sky on top of somebody.
I would like that. For sure.
It's got lane change detection. And it's got the follow me thing. So you just find another airplane, you can tail behind it. No, but cool. It's interesting. It was an article. I forget whether it's like the Atlantic or the New York Times, but they were talking about how this company has really gone it alone and they're doing their own thing and they're ready for production.
Wow.
It's like being an author. Going it alone.
You don't need a license. Like being an author, you don't need a license because it fits into the ultralight category or something like that. And as long as you don't go towards populated areas, you're okay.
Yeah. I like the sound of this one. It sounds really accessible.
Yeah. I'll find it.
Cool.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. This has just been a blast. And I really look forward to reading the next book, Nitro Express.
Yeah, that is number 2.
Express. And
you do a Sorry, go ahead.
You do a smart thing. Is this just an automatic? Tell me, is this just your publisher that does this? But you put, I think it's the first chapter of Nitro Express is stuck at the end. I've seen this a couple of times with other books. Stuck at the end of the first book.
Just when you think you've finished writing the first draft, you got to start the next book and then kind of stick to it. It is not easy.
But it's very smart. It's very smart because once it's like, I don't know, I'm not totally sleepy yet. I'll go part way into this chapter, and then you're in it, and you've got to get
3 a.m.
Yeah. Well, it's a way to keep people going through your series, which is really brilliant.
Well, you guys are my favorite interviewers. The way you go at the topic and the subject of writing, and I come away smarter about my own books and my own process. So I'm really grateful to you guys. Very much.
Oh, I mean, a pleasure. We have no idea what we're doing, but
I have no idea.
We do it anyway.
It's working.
Okay. We have a new outro. I'm going to play it now. Thank you again, Robert, for joining us. It was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Good night. Take care.
Funny Not Funny is produced by Jim Infantino at Slab Media in Boston. Lionel Casson is the co-host. Our website is funnynotfunny.bigego.com. The background music you're listening to is the song Hum from Utopia Revisited by Jim Infantino. The opinions presented by the co-hosts are ridiculous and should not be taken seriously by anyone. Our intended audience is literally nobody. If you're listening to this podcast, you should stop immediately and seek help. Please do not subscribe or leave a rating or review. It only encourages us to make more. Thanks for listening.